I must admit that whenever a good release comes around that doesn't have lyrics, I breathe a sigh of relief, as I'm absolved of the responsibility of interpreting words and language in intricate orders and print screening pages on Genius for the video. If it's just instrumental, then maybe I can just get away with describing the neat sounds with wacky images, the type of soundscapes that have you comparing synths to salami slices or something. Here comes neuroscientist Sam Shepard, adopting the name Floating Points, dishing out an album he made in just 5 weeks, but only following a tour with the XX in which he challenged himself and his audiences to reckon with some of his most off-kilter material to date. That doesn't manifest on his new album Crush, but the remnants of this ambition remained in a more controlled state. This will likely be a straightforward review, only because I understood this one immediately. Sure, reach into the bag and pull out whatever electronic music subcategories you believe this belongs to, because frankly, I couldn't care less. Crush bows its magic readily within the first 4 minutes on fillets, like the startup jingle for a magic orchestra, preparing the air, loading the chunks, birthing the atmosphere like it was initializing strings, as well as variables, int synth, and double flute. The music is lush, but it sounds as if it's missing fragments, which furthers the sense of fluid mystery that carries throughout the next 2 tracks, Last Bloom and Anasickmodular. My favourite 2 on the album, that make the most of their looping drum pattern and gather the spontaneous synth sparkling into a bit of a melody of its own. It sounds like a portrait of the stars coming into focus, effervescent like pop bubbles for the ears. Very few things, aside from buying new stationery and that series with Claire the pastry chef, would reinstill my optimism quite like that. And I'm talking about the variety of synths on Anasickmodular that jump around sporadically, squeal, and are absolutely pinging like half the attendees at an EDM festival. There's a beauty to how Anastasia Night Modular grows. Its synths don't sound too far off from the harmonious and grating squeal of the average bagpipes kit, but in context it sounds like it's writhing in pain and wishing it could go back. At the risk of sounding like a corny motherfucker, Floating Points could not be any more a fitting name given how unfixed the music seems to be. It has a mathematical ethos, but you should know that mathematicians still have hearts, at least the ones in my comp sys classes that leave examination rooms crying, so I can still hear these songs and feel things, and a great example is actually one of the slow sparer tracks near the start, the Requiem for CS70 in strings, exactly what it says on the tin, and what's in the tin is strange but enough to bring a first timer to tears, so like pickled onions then. If you want to really feel the heartbreak set in, there's a repetitious sirening on environments that takes over at the end like a machine signaling the end of its runtime, and before long it's left in the dust and forgotten about. The track just moves on. Moments like these elevate the songs from merely well-designed soundscapes to ones with a real emotional tangibility, as if to breathe a story through its particular choice of texture and design, which is why the last little stretch of the album tends to disappoint a little bit, seeing as Birth and Sea Watch flatline the momentum and leave you simply waiting for the finale to arrive, like a lovely designed but nonetheless tiring loading screen. You can still hear strings swimming in the glistening pool, but the album's best feature is providing movement, and more so, fluid movement. For this reason, the last 2-part suite underwhelms in texture. It's a little bit dry, in spite of the scampering, shrill drum pattern that should be exciting but isn't, let alone the random atonal textures squelching over it, the sound of whisking in a metal bowl, street market clerk yelling through a talk box, and that stacker game that scams everybody at the arcade. If those still sound like interesting sounds to listen to in the midst of an IDM piece, I'm not gonna lie, they actually are, but after such a propulsive album that carries you to magic places, it's a bit of an empty final destination. Still, I like that the album stems from a place of inner chaos and spontaneity, but it's still contained within a very sturdy framework that keeps it moving smoothly, at least for the phenomenal first 8 tracks, and who knows, maybe one day I will be in the mood for hearing the combined sounds of a whisking bowl, street market clerk, and a game of stacker. I'm not too good for anything, I still enjoy listening to the Mountain Goats.